The rain had been falling for hours. Jessica watched the endless streams of water sliding down the car window. The rhythmic drumming of raindrops against the roof blurring together into a dull, hypnotic noise. The wipers swept across the windshield in slow, tired arcs, barely keeping up with the downpour. Beyond the glass, the world was a shadowy blur of dark asphalt and twisting, unfamiliar roads. Mike's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He was leaning forward slightly, eyes squinting against the fog, clinging to the road ahead. "We should stop soon," Jessica murmured, rubbing her arms. The car's heater was on, but a strange chill had settled in her bones. "We're both exhausted." Mike nodded, but didn't take his eyes off the road. "Yeah, I just need to find something. Haven't seen a motel in miles." Jessica sighed and checked her phone. No signal. Of course, the last town had been over an hour ago, and they had somehow ended up on an empty stretch of highway, swallowed by trees and mist. The headlights illuminated an old road sign as they passed. The letters were weathered, barely readable through the grime and rust. Route 59, Westwood County. Jessica had never heard of it. The road twisted sharply, forcing Mike to slow down. The rain made the pavement slick, and the tires slid slightly before catching. Jessica's fingers dug into her seatbelt. Then, through the sheets of rain, something appeared in the distance. A building. Jessica sat up. Look, Mike had already seen it. An old hotel loomed at the side of the road, its neon sign flickering weakly against the storm. Hotel Darkwater. Some of the letters had burned out, leaving gaps in the glow. Hotel Dierkawar. Jessica shivered. The place looked old. Not just worn down, but ancient in a way that made her uneasy. The architecture was strange, almost Gothic, with tall, narrow windows and dark wood paneling. The building was large, much bigger than a roadside motel should be. Mike turned into the driveway, the tires crunching over wet gravel. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for a single, dusty sedan parked near the entrance. A dimly lit vacancy sign buzzed in one of the windows. Jessica swallowed the lump in her throat. Something about this place felt off, not in an obvious way. There was no flashing neon sign screaming danger, but a quiet creeping wrongness, like stepping into a place that had been forgotten by time. Mike shut off the engine and turned to her with a tired smile. "Better than sleeping in the car, right?" Jessica forced a small laugh. "Yeah, I guess." But as she stepped out into the cold, rainy night, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had just made a mistake. The lobby was too quiet. Jessica stepped inside, immediately hit by the scent of damp wood and something faintly metallic, like rusted iron. The air was thick, humid, as if the rain had seeped through the walls and settled into the very bones of the building. The interior was just as old as the exterior. The floor was covered in a faded red carpet, its once elegant patterns dulled by time and grime. A massive chandelier hung from the ceiling, its golden frame tarnished, its crystals coated in dust. Only a few of its bulbs were still working, casting long, flickering shadows across the room. Mike let out a breath and shook the rain from his jacket. Well, at least it's dry. Jessica wasn't so sure. She eyed the Fafakan front desk at the far end of the lobby. A grand antique counter with deep scratches along the wood as if something had clawed at it. A small brass bell sat on top. There was no one there. Mike tapped the bell. A sharp metallic chime echoed through the empty space. A door behind the counter. creaked open. Jessica barely held back a flinch as the woman glided how into view. She was unnaturally pale. Her skin had a sickly, almost waxen quality, stretched tight over delicate cheekbones. Her eyes were a washed-out shade of gray, empty, unreadable, as if she weren't looking at them, but through them. Her lips barely moved when she spoke. "Welcome to Hotel Darkwater." Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a blade. Mike cleared his throat. Yeah, we need a room for the night." She nodded slowly, as if processing the request took effort. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, she reached under the desk and pulled out a rusted key. Jessica noticed something strange. It wasn't a key card, like most hotels used, but an actual Punt's old-fashioned brass key. A small black tag dangled from it, the number 306, etched into the surface. The woman slid it across the counter. "Room 306, va?" Mike took the key, but Jessica hesitated. There was something wrong to us about this woman. Not just the way she looked, but the way she moved. The way she stood too still when she wasn't speaking. Jessica forced a smile. "Thanks." The woman tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. Then, in that same low, almost whispered voice, she said something else. "Do not leave your room after midnight." Silence. Jessica felt an icy shiver crawl up her spine. "Why?" The woman's pale lips curved slightly, almost like the suggestion of a smile. "For your own safety." Mike let out a small chuckle, shifting uncomfortably. "Creepy hotel policy, huh?" The woman said nothing. Jessica glanced around the lobby again. There was down there, no other guests. No staff, just the flickering lights, the peeling wallpaper, and the heavy silence pressing against her ears. And then she noticed something else. Somewhere in the distance. Drip, drip, drip. She turned her head slightly, listening. Water. A slow, rhythmic dripping echoed from the ceiling above them. Jessica looked up, expecting to see a leak, but the ceiling was bone dry. Her stomach twisted. "Jess?" Mike touched her arm. "You okay?" Jessica tore her gaze away and nodded. Yeah, let's just get to the room." She didn't look back at the front desk as they walked away. But she could feel the woman's gaze on her, unblinking, watching, until the elevator door slid shut behind them. The hallway leading to room 306 was dimly lit, the old sconces on the walls flickering with a weak, sickly yellow glow. The carpet beneath Jessica's feet was damp, though she saw no visible stains. A chill hung in the air, the kind that seeped into the bones, making the skin prickle with unease. As they reached their room, Mike twisted the old brass key in the lock. The stud door creaked open slowly, revealing a space that was somehow both grand and decayed at the same time. It was larger than Jessica expected. Tall ceilings, heavy velvet curtains draped over the windows, and antique furniture that looked like it belonged in another century. A massive four-poster bed stood in the center, its dark wooden frame casting deep shadows. The air smelled faintly of stagnant water. Mike tossed his bag onto a nearby chair. Not bad for a creepy old hotel. Jessica stepped inside hesitantly. Something about the room felt wrong. It wasn't obvious, nothing out of place, nothing overtly strange, but there was a heaviness in the air, an unseen presence that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. Then she noticed it. Wet footprints near the bathroom door. Bare footprints trailed across the floor, dark, wet, and fresh. Jessica's heart lurched. They were small, like a child's, leading her from past the bathroom toward the bed. And then they just stopped, as if whoever had made them had simply vanished. She swallowed hard. Mike? He was already pulling off his jacket, oblivious. Yeah? Jessica pointed. Look. Mike followed her gaze, but when he looked back at her, he frowned. Look at what? Jessica blinked. The footprints were gone. Her breath caught, but they were just... She stopped. Maybe I imagined it. The stress, the exhaustion, the eerie atmosphere, it was getting to her. She shook her head. Never mind. Mike raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. I'm going to take a quick shower. You should try to get some rest. Jessica nodded, but sleep was the last thing on her mind. The moment Mike closed the bathroom door, she let out a slow breath and rubbed her arms, trying to shake the unease creeping over her. That was when she heard it. Drip, drip, drip. Jessica turned toward the bathroom. The sound of running water trickled from under the door. The shower was on, but something was wrong. The water didn't sound normal. It was too thick, too heavy, like something sluggish and dense puddle was flowing through the pipes instead of clear water. Then a gurgling noise. A low, bubbling choked came from the drain, like something was trying to crawl out. Jessica took a step closer, her breath shallow. She placed her palm against the door. It was Henry's cold. Suddenly the shower shut off. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then, the mirror above the dresser shifted. Jessica froze. It wasn't the mirror itself that moved, but the reflection inside it. She saw herself standing there. Same clothes, same expression. But something was off. Her reflection's chest wasn't rising and falling. Jessica inhaled sharply. Her real self did, but the reflection dust didn't. It just stood there, staring back with wide, unblinking eyes. A drop of red dock water rolled down the glass from the reflection's forehead. But Jessica's own skin was dry. Her reflection smiled. Jessica didn't. A loud bang came from the bathroom. She spun around. Mike? She called, her voice shaking. The door creaked open slowly. Mike stepped out, rubbing a towel over his damp hair. Yeah? Jessica's eyes darted back to the mirror. Her reflection was normal again. The room's psyche felt different now. The air was thicker, heavier. The smell of dark water clung to everything. Jessica forced a laugh. Nothing, just tired. But deep down she knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. And whatever it was watching her. The push clock on the nightstand which at 11:58 p.m. The room had settled into an eerie silence, the kind that made Jessica's ears ring from the absence hours of sound. Mike was already asleep, his slow, steady breathing the only thing grounding her in the moment. But Jessica lay awake, her body tense beneath the heavy hotel blanket. Something about the night felt wrong. The air was too thick, damp with the faint scent of mildew and something metallic, like rusted iron. The dim glow from the bedside lamp flickered now and then, casting shifting shadows across the old wallpaper. Then it began. A whisper. Jessica's eyes snapped open. It was faint at first, just a soft murmur. Outside the door, barely audible over the steady patter of rain against the window. She held her breath, straining to listen. Another whisper. Then another. The voices were low, hushed, like a conversation happening just beyond the threshold. The words were distorted, as if they were being spoken underwater. Jessica's skin prickled. She slowly sat up, glancing toward the door. The room's heavy shadows seemed to press closer as the whispers grew louder. Then came the swoosh, scratching. A slow, deliberate scraping sound against the wood teen the fingernail or something sharp. Jessica's breath hitched. She turned to wake Mike, but something stopped her. A voice. It was a woman's voice, soft yet urgent. Let me in. Jessica's pulse spiked. She gripped the blanket tightly, her fingers digging into the fabric. Another scratch. Please, it's so cold out here. The voice was real close now. Right outside the door, Jessica's throat went dry. Slowly, heart pounding in her chest, she slid out of bed. Her bare feet touched the cold floor, and she tiptoed toward the door, barely breathing. Mike stirred in his sleep but didn't wake. Jessica hesitated, then pressed her jagir against the wood. Silence. Then, a single knock. Thump. Jessica jerked back. Her hand trembled as she reached for the puppy pole. She hesitated. Something inside her screamed not to look, but she did. A pale face filled the peephole. Jessica's blood turned to ice. It was a woman, but not alive. Her skin was corpse white, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. Her lips were cracked, the corners slightly upturned in a sick mockery of a smile. But it was her eyes that made Jessica's stomach lurch, or rather, the Eli's absence of them. Two empty black sockets stared back at her. Dark water dripped from them, rolling down her cheeks like tears. Jessica slapped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. The woman tilted her head. Then she smiled wider. Jessica stumbled back, heart hammering. The door handle rattled. The whispers outside turned to screams. They weren't coming from just one voice anymore. There was like many. Men, women, children. Their voices rose in a horrific chorus, a wailing cacophony. Of pain and desperation, the door shook violently. Jessica turned and shook Mike awake. Mike, wake up, he groaned, blinking in confusion. Jess, what? Bang. The door slammed inward an inch, the lock barely holding. Jessica half shrieked. Mike jolted up. What the hell? The screaming cacophony stopped. Silence fell over the room again. Only the sound of Fandikudo dripping water remained. Jessica turned back to the door, her body shaking. She forced herself to look through the peephole again. The woman was gone. But the last thing Jessica saw before she turned away were the Poituzu wet footprints seeping beneath the door. Drip. Jessica stirred in her sleep. Drip, drip. A slow Hagenasted steady dripping filled the silence like water leaking from a broken faucet. The air felt thick, heavy, with humidity. She shifted under the covers, reaching out instinctively toward Mike, but her hand touched nothing. Jessica's eyes fluttered open. The bed beside her was empty. Her breath caught. The sheets were soaked. Dark, wet patches spread across the mattress, cold and clammy beneath her fingertips. Mike's clothes were still there, but instead of being neatly folded or tossed aside, they lay in a crumpled, drenched heap. It was as if his body had just vanished, leaving only the soaked fabric behind. Jessica's pulse, spiked. She sat up, heart pounding. Mike? No answer. She scanned the room. The air felt wrong. It smelled of stagnant water, mildew, and something faintly metallic. The dim lamp flickered weakly, casting uneasy shadows along the peeling wallpaper. Then, the gurgling. Jessica stiffened. It came from the bathroom. A slow, wet choking sound. Like something thick bubbling up from the drain. Jessica swallowed hard. Mike? She called again. her voice barely above a whisper. No response. The bathroom door was closed. A faint light seeped out from the crack beneath it, flickering like a candle struggling against the wind. Jessica slid out of bed, her bare feet touching the damp carpet. It squelched slightly under her weight. She didn't remember it being wet before. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer to the bathroom. Her hand hovered over the yash doorknob. The gurgling sound grew louder. Then a faint, wet whisper. Jessica. Her breath hitched. It sounded like Mike's voice, but wrong, warped, distorted, as if it was being dragged up from beneath her deep water. Her hand trembled as she gripped the doorknob. It was a V-turn now, icy cold. Slowly, Jessica turned it. The door creaked open. The bathroom was steaming. A thick dark fog clung to the air, distorting the edges of the small tiled room. The mirror above the sink was completely fogged over, streaks of moisture running down the glass. The bathtub was full, but not with water. A thick, black liquid mains filled the porcelain tub, churning and bubbling like a living thing. Jessica's stomach twisted, and then it moved. Something shifted beneath the surface. Jessica stumbled back. Mike! A can't-pen broke through the surface of the black water. Jessica screamed. It was pale, bloated, not human anymore. Then, a face. Mike's face, but his eyes were gone. Dark, empty sockets stared up at her as his lips parted in a gurgling whisper. Help me. Jessica now staggered backward. The mirror behind her cleared. For a second she saw her own reflection. And standing, right behind her, was the pale woman. With the empty eye sockets, the bathroom door she slammed shut. The last thing Jessica heard before the lights flickered out was the sound of Seetan's splashing footsteps, moving toward her in the dark. The lights died in instantly. Jessica was plunged into darkness, her breath catching in her throat. The only sound was her own panicked breathing and the wet, dragging footsteps creeping toward her. Squelch, squelch. Something wet, cold and damp, brushed against her bare arm. Jessica jerked away, slamming into the bathroom wall. Her heart pounded violently, the icy moisture seeping into her skin. Then came the whisper, right next to her ear. You shouldn't be here. A pair of the freezing hands, clamped around her wrists. Jessica's teeth screamed, and saying, thrashing against the unseen grip. The hands were soaking wet, fingers digging into her skin like claws. With a burst of adrenaline, she tore away, stumbling blindly toward the door. Her hands found the handle. She yanked. The door wouldn't budge. Something handsome moved behind her. The sound of unsloshing liquid stonsinust filled the room, as if something massive was rising from the bathtub. Jessica squeezed her eyes shut. No. Then a guttural voice. Low, distorted. Jessica, look at me. She felt it and looming behind her. A wave of putrid, icy air washed over her. Jessica refused. She would not turn round. The thing behind her laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound, like a drowning throat trying to mimic laughter. Then the mirror shattered. A violent, ear-splitting crack ripped through the room as the glass exploded outward. Razor-sharp shards flying in all directions. Jessica instinctively threw up her arms to protect her face, feeling a few slivers slice her skin. The impact knocked her backward, straight into the bathtub. The second Jessica hit the foot, that thick black water around her world, instead she tilted. The liquid was ice-cold, mouthwash, and impossibly dense, dragging her down as if it had a mind of its own. She tried to scream, but the second she opened her mouth, the water forced itself inside. A fetal, bitter, metallic taste flooded her throat. It was like swallowing rotting wood and local rusted nails. Her body hurried convulsed as she fought, thrashing wildly, her arms clawing at the surface. But there was no surface anymore. The tub was gone. She was sinking, deeper, deeper. The light above her shrunk into a pinprick, disappearing into the abyss. Shapes are removed. In the darkness below, pale faces, empty black sockets, mouths, wide open in silent screams. Jessica tried to kick upward, but something grabbed her ankle, a hand, then another, then dozens. Ice-cold fingers wrapped around her limbs, yanking her downward. A distorted chorus of voices filled the water. Stay with us. Don't leave. Join us. Her lungs burned. Her vision blurred. Then, upward blinding light, a force yanked her upward. Jessica gasped for air as she was ripped out of the water, crashing onto the cold, wet tiles of the bathroom floor. She coughed violently, black liquid spilling from her mouth. Her hands trembled as she pushed herself up. The tub was got empty, but the mirror was still shattered, and the pathword smeared across the broken glass, written in dripping black water, made her blood run cold. Room 306 belongs to her. Jessica scrambled to her feet, her breath ragged. She stumbled out of the bathroom, her vision spinning. The hotel room was just different now. The wallpaper was peeling away in long, soggy strips. The floorboards bulged and warped, as if swollen from water damage. The damp air was thick with the stench of rot. And worst of all, Mike was still missing. But before Jessica could react, the door to the hallway creaked open. Not by her hand. Jessica's stomach dropped. The hallway outside was pitch black, but she could hear them. The whispers, the wet footsteps, and at the very end of the dark corridor, Ashkavan, the pale figure, stood waiting, the woman with empty black eyes. And this time, she stepped inside the room. Jessica's eyes snapped open. She was lying in bed, her body damp with sweat. Her chest heaved as she sucked in air, her heart still hammering from what? She blinked. The hotel room looked normal. The wallpaper was intact, the floor dry, the air free of that awful damp rot. The bathroom door stood ajar, and from where she lay, she could see the mirror. Unbroken, spotless. Soft morning light filtered through the curtains. Jessica slowly turned her head. Mike was next to her, sleeping. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, his face peaceful. For a moment, she just stared at him, her mind struggling to process. Had it been a dream? It had to be. Jessica exhaled, rubbing her face. Her hands weren't cut. Her skin panda was dry. There was no black water, no whispers, no empty-eyed woman. Everything was fine. A wave of relief had washed over her. She shook Mike's shoulder gently. "Hey, wake up," he groaned, stretching. Morning already? Yeah, we should get going." Mike ran a hand through his hair and yawned. "Man, I slept like a rock." He glanced at her. "You okay?" Jessica hesitated. "Yeah," she said. "Just a weird dream." Mike smirked. "Told you that gas station sushi was a bad idea." She laughed. For the first time in hours, maybe longer, it actually felt real. They packed their bags, checked out at the front desk. The pale receptionist barely looked up, and walked out to their parka. The sky was bright, the rain had stopped, and the world felt normal again. Jessica climbed into the passenger seat, buckled up, and leaned back as Mike started the car. The Most Hotel faded into the distances as they drove away. Everything was fine. Jessica closed her eyes. The hum of the engine, the gentle rocking of the car, it was soothing. She drifted off. A bump in the road had jolted her awake. Jessica blinked, rubbing her eyes. Outside the window, the landscape stretched out before her. Her breath hussy caught. The same road, the same twisted, water-damaged signs. The same darkened Hotel Bonn looming in the distance. Jessica's pulse conspiked. "No," she whispered. She turned to Mike, confusion flooding her voice. "Mike, what's going on? We already left." Mike didn't answer. Her stomach snorted. Slowly, she turned to look at the driver's seat. Mike was gone. Instead, the pale woman with black, empty eyes sat beside her. A twisted smile stretched across her lips. The car kept driving, and the hotel was waiting.